Hi guys, and this time I'd like to take an opportunity to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. Not the role-playing game, but the 1983 animated kids show. This was a Saturday morning style cartoon series, much in the same style as Thundercats or He-Man, and ran for 27 episodes up until 1985. Now lots of people have spoken about the series itself with far more skill and eloquence than I can muster, but I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the characters and how they relate to the role-playing game, and to obsess for a while over their magical items. As the introduction of the series showed us every episode, it focused on a group of 6 friends who are riding on a Dungeons & Dragons themed roller coaster when they are transported into the titular world, and each episode followed their adventures as they tried to find a way home with the help of their guide, the Dungeon Master. The 6 heroes of the series were Hank the Ranger, who was the leader of the group. He's one of the older kids, and is perhaps the most heroic of them all. A stable-headed warrior, and perhaps the easiest to convert over into the RPG, as he's exactly as described, a ranger who uses a magic bow. But we'll come back to the bow later. Hank is a little bland, a generic good guy, but that's not to say he's boring, as the cartoon did allow him to have his flaws, and did give him the chance to have some great moments when he loses trust in the Dungeon Master and decides that the kids should follow their own plans. And next up we've got Erik the Cavalier, who's the comic character of the series. He's a cowardly knight, his behaviour forced on the show by parents groups due to his contrary nature. Erik doesn't always agree with Hank's decisions, and isn't afraid to make his own decisions, so there were demands that he, like many other similar characters in kids' shows who don't go along with the group consensus and try to go their own way, must receive a comeuppance for this behaviour. Erik is described as a cavalier, a class from 1st edition D&D, but these days would be more commonly just classed as a straight fighter, who uses his magical shield to bash opponents, since each character in the cartoon was only allowed to have a single magical item, so no matter how many opportunities there were for Erik to grab a sword in his other hand, it just never happened. And we've also got Diana, the Acrobat. Now in many ways Diana is the most resourceful and smart character in the series. She's as insightful and brave as any of the other characters, and her talents in many ways carry over from the real world, where she was an Olympic-level gymnast. She is also possibly the most hardy of the characters, as she constantly, no matter the weather, just wears what seems to be a furry bikini. And I don't know if it was just me, but I always felt it was very progressive of the show to make perhaps the most competent and trustworthy character in the series a black female. For me, she's pretty much the best character in the show, especially considering that she is stuck with perhaps the worst of the magic items that any of the characters receives, a magical staff. Although like Cavalier, Acrobat is a 1st edition character class which has now been abandoned, Diana actually fits into the modern game as a monk pretty well, matching their movement enhancements and fighting styles almost exactly. The next kid is Albert, although his real name is barely spoken, as the other kids even before entering the Dungeons & Dragons world already seem to call him Presto, who fortunately becomes a magician, for he'd be a badly named paladin. Presto is another comic character, but this time more bumbling than being punished by the writers. Although he's supposed to be a magician, presumably some sort of wizard or sorcerer, he doesn't really seem to cast spells in any recognisable way from the RPG. He instead reads out nonsense rhymes and reaches into his magic item, a wizard's hat, which then brings into existence something useful, or commonly for laughs, it creates something useless but comical. While I liked Presto a lot, he's not really a major driver of storylines, as he's slightly nervous all the time, which puts him into the background position behind the more confident characters. Presto is one of the harder characters to classify for the modern RPG, as making him a wizard or sorcerer gives him power that he never really displays for himself, as he basically just appears to be a person with a magic hat, rather than having any mastery of the arcane arts. Getting towards the end of the group, we've got Sheila the Thief, is in many ways the supporting character to Hank, the Daphne to his Fred. She tends to just echo his statements and supports him as the moral centre of the group. That's not to say she's not brave and resourceful, because using her cloak of invisibility she often puts herself in more danger than the other characters, by putting herself amongst the enemies. But her description as a thief doesn't really match her character much, as the class generally picks locks and pockets, whereas Sheila's cloak allows her to sneak and not much else. So while it's definitely possible that she's actually a rogue in modern D&D, she's one who only has sneak skills, rather than any of the other classic roguish abilities. And finally we get to Bobbie the Barbarian, Sheila's little brother. Which, given Sheila is one of the younger characters as well, makes me wonder how this group were friends in the real world. As even if Bobbie was tagging along as the annoying little brother, the rest of the group vary in age from Sheila at 13 up to Hank at 15, which is quite a lot of a difference at that age. Bobbie is the most impulsive member of the group, usually reacting to protect his pet unicorn when it's in danger, but rushing off into combat when challenged, so very suited to being a D&D barbarian, and is well kitted out with a club which can cause earthquake-like effects when it's smashed into the ground. Now, while I've been going through them, you may have noticed some difference in the power of the items that each of the characters was given. For example, Diana has what is basically a magic staff, which she uses along with her acrobatic skills. However, apart from the ability for the staff to repair itself if it is broken by just touching the broken ends together, and the ability to be shrunk down to matchstick sized so she can seal it on a person, it doesn't really seem to have any useful abilities in their adventures. Bobbie's club does have its earthquake effects, and allows him to hit extremely hard. Sheila's cloak gives her invisibility, which can be useful, but far below the power of the final three. Because Erik's shield not only appears to be a magical shield, but it can generate a force field-like bubble around Erik and anyone close to him, making them all but immune to attacks, which is absolutely great. Presto's hat allows him to summon up almost anything in imagination from its depths, and it would possibly be the most powerful item, as in one episode he successfully summons an aircraft carrier from the real world. But Presto's inability to use the item properly means that more often than not he'll summon a cow or other useless items. But the king of the items is Hank's energy bow. On paper it doesn't sound very powerful, an enchanted bow which creates glowing arrows of energy when it is pulled. But it's the uses that Hank can put these to that makes it powerful, as he can fire them and leave a trail behind, which acts as a rope. So by firing an arrow into the top of a cliff, the group can easily scale it. The bow can generate multiple arrows, allowing to hit numerous targets at once. It can create arrows which entangle and capture opponents, and in fact only seems to be limited by the imagination of the user, like some kind of Green Lantern ring. Honestly, who wouldn't want one of these? A machine gun energy bow with a stun setting, which allows you to use it as a harpoon. It's great. In fact, in debates between my friends at game nights, we're all of the opinion that the bow may very well be artifact level of magical energy, whereas all of the other items pretty much just come across as standard magical items, especially the magic stick that Diana ended up with. But I think I've spent enough time ranting on about a 37-year-old kid's cartoon, so please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you remember the series? And, tell me the truth, did you want Hank's bow? Please remember to like and subscribe to the video, as it really helps me out in trying to get somewhere with the YouTube algorithm. But, most of all, as always, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye.